quiet woman who finds it difficult to express her feelings. The girl's name is Yum Mejong. Today, she ate with her office friends after coming home from work. Mejong kept quiet when all her friends were busy chatting until one of her friends asked why Mejong hadn't joined the club at the office. Because all office people must join one club, Mejong answered that she couldn't because her house was very far from the office, so she had to go home early. After eating, they decided to go bowling. During the excitement of the game, Mejong still feels lonely because she has difficulty socializing and finds it difficult to build friendships with everyone. So Mejong asked her friends for permission to go home first because her house was far away. After that, Mejong went to the restaurant to meet her older sister and go home together. Mejong's older sister is called Yijong. She is very different from Mejong. The girl has a very extroverted, expressive, and wild nature. So while her older sister was busy talking with her friends, Mejong quietly listened to them talk about various things. Gijong said that he was stressed because she was old now, but she never got married. The reason is that she has yet to find the proper girlfriend. Gijong also said she had just dated a widower with one child. According to her, dating a widower is very uncomfortable because a widower will prioritize his child. Hearing the story, Gijong's friends immediately tried to stop her from saying more. At this time, a man sitting next to them was a widower with his daughter. Realizing that the atmosphere had become awkward because of them, the women decided to leave home immediately. It turned out that Mejong recognized the widower because the man was her office mate. When saying goodbye to the man, Mejong bowed as an apology for her sister's words, which might have been rude. After that, the scene shows a man who had a big fight with his girlfriend. Then he was dumped by his girlfriend. It turned out that the woman was having an affair with a man who she thought was richer. The sad man whom his lover currently abandons is Chang Hee, Mejong's older brother. After that, the three of them were seen returning to their home far away in the village using a taxi. While in the taxi, the three were silent, thinking about their problems while looking at the city streets. The next day, they helped their parents work in the fields. Their parents worked as farmers who owned quite a large area of land in the village. In that place, there was a man whom Mejong's father hired to help him as a farmer. The man's name is Mr. Gu. The man's background is unclear. He never told anyone about his identity or past. Suddenly, he came to the village and asked Mejong's father to become a farmer. Because Mr. Yum needed a subordinate, then he finally hired Mr. Gu. They rested while enjoying lunch when tired of working in the garden. At this time, Chang Hee complained to his parents about not having a car, so he lost his girlfriend. This young man felt he was being cheated on because he looked like a poor person. So Chang Hee asked his father for permission to buy a car, but Mr. Yum forbade him. Before this incident, Chang Hee had tried to pay for the car in installments but couldn't afford to pay the car bill. Because he didn't get permission, Chang Hee vented his anger. He said the reason why the three of them didn't get married until they were old was because they didn't have a car and they were seen as poor people. That night, Chang Hee gathered with a friend in his village named Du Huan. They talked about their respective love problems. Chang Hee said that his girlfriend had just cheated on him. But Du Huan also said that his life was worse. He has yet to date long because every woman he approaches always avoids him. After all, Du Huan just went bankrupt. Besides that, his face was considered not handsome, so many girls rejected him. Even one of the women he approached said that Du Huan was like an abandoned dog. After telling all the burdens in their hearts, they became more relieved and laughed at their respective lives. Then they wonder if their lives would have been better if they had not been born in a remote village like now, but had been born in a capital city like Seoul. At that time, Chang Hee immediately answered that they would be better than today. The next morning, Mejong went to the office as usual. While on the road, Mejong met Mr. Gu, but the man just passed by without saying anything. This makes Mejong think that the man is just like her, introverted and has difficulty communicating with others. While in the office, Mejong was asked to face her boss and two other male employees. Their boss called the three of them because they had one thing in common. They decided not to join clubs at the office, even though it is mandatory to deepen friendships in the office. It turns out that of the other two people, one of whom Mejong had already met, he was a widower with one child who met them at the restaurant. Their boss asked why they decided not to join the club. Mejong answered that her house was very far from the office, so when she came home from work, she had to go straight home. Then the widower with one child explained that he couldn't join the club because he had to take care of his daughter when he got home from work, and another man explained that he couldn't join the club because he was an introvert. Their boss said it was office policy, so the three of them would inevitably have to choose one of the clubs in the future. After talking about that, Mejong returned to do her office work. But suddenly, she saw that her other boss was scribbling on her work. The boss said Mejong's work needed to improve, and she had to improve her performance. After returning from the office, Mejong went to the cafe to fix her work. Mi-jung felt very sad at that place because she had just been scolded. However, she needed clarification about where to tell the story because she was introverted and had no friends. Mi-jung could only cry alone. Mi-jung overheard her co-workers talking about her the next day at the office. At that time, one of her friends asked a male employee who didn't have a girlfriend why he didn't try to approach Mi-jung. The man answered that Mi-jung was beautiful, but her personality was ordinary and boring. So, Mi-jung becomes very unattractive. Mi-jung kept thinking about what the man said, so the question arose. Why was her personality not exciting and boring, and why was she the quiet girl she was now? Mi-jung thought that if she had only been born in the capital, she would be a different person who was not as restrained as she is now. She wanted to say something but needed clarification. She wants to make friends but doesn't have friends who understand her. The next morning, Mi-jung got a message from a bank employee. At that time, the bank employee said that Mi-jung's credit debt was due, so Mi-jung had to pay it immediately. If Mi-jung can't pay it, they will send a letter to her house. Here, we show the reasons why Mi-jung got into debt. She owed it not to herself but to a man. Mi-jung once knew and was close to a man, but the man asked Mi-jung to borrow money in her name from the bank so that he could get into debt in Mi-jung's name. And what she didn't expect, the man tricked her. Mi-jung was too innocent, and now when the man doesn't pay his debts, Mi-jung is the one who has to bear everything. That night, Mi-jung tried to contact the man, but the man never replied. The three of them had a party with friends in the village that night. Once again that night, they talked about their respective problems. Mi-jung still has problems, but she's a very introverted person. She just listened to what her friends were talking about while thinking about the debt problems she had to face. The next day, Mi-jung went to Ms. Gu's house. Of course, Ms. Gu was shocked and asked why Mi-jung came to his place. Mi-jung answered that she had asked Ms. Gu for help so that the debt letters sent by post would be sent to Ms. Gu's house. Mi-jung asked Ms. Gu to keep this matter a secret because Mi-jung didn't want her family to know that she had a large debt at the bank. Without asking, Mr. Gu, an introvert, immediately agreed to Mi-jung's request for help. The next day after work, Ms. Gu gave the bill to Mi-jung. That night, Mrs. Yum told Mi-jung to deliver food to Ms. Gu's house. When arriving at Mr. Gu's house, Mi-jung, who felt she had caused trouble to Mr. Gu, tried to explain why the debt bill had to be left at Mr. Gu's house. At this moment, even though Mi-jung had explained everything, Ms. Gu just remained silent. Mi-jung feels that they both have the same characteristics, and when she was with Mr. Gu, Mi-jung felt calm. She thought Mr. Gu could understand her, two introverts in a hectic world. The next day, the office held a group meal. At this moment, everyone has been assigned a group to sit together. It turned out that Mi-jung was at the same table as two of her friends, Tae-hoon and Changmin, who had decided not to join the club. After eating, Mi-jung coincidentally shared the elevator with Ta-hoon. There, Mi-jung apologized for what her older sister said at that time. She was worried that it would offend Ta-hoon, but Ta-hoon said it wasn't a problem. That night, Mi-jung gathered together with her siblings and village friends. It turned out that that day they decided to go to town. Here, a woman appears whom Mi-jung admires. She is Yuna, a girl who has very different characteristics from Mi-jung. Yuna is someone who makes friends very quickly and efficiently expresses what she thinks. Yuna also doesn't care what other people say about her. Therefore, in her heart, Mi-jung wants to be someone like Yuna. Even Mi-jung often dreams of being an independent girl like Yuna. At this moment, Mi-jung also thought that if she were born again, she would want to be like Yuna because Mi-jung is now constantly afraid of what people will think of her. She also needs help to express what she wants. Because of that, she is not free and feels this world is complicated. Mi-jung is also often lonely because she usually suppresses everything she wants to say. While working, Chang-hee supervises the shops in his branch. Coincidentally, that day, the cashier at the shop was busy. Because of that, Chang-hee helped her to become a temporary cashier. While he was working as a cashier, Chang-hee's ex-girlfriend suddenly arrived who was buying at the shop. And what was even more surprising was that the woman brought her new boyfriend. When they met, Chang-hee pretended not to know the girl because he still felt hurt. Apart from that, Chang-hee also felt embarrassed and inappropriate, because now his ex-girlfriend's new guy is more handsome and decadent than Chang-hee. That's why he was self-conscious and pretended to be a stranger to his ex. Afterwards, Chang-hee could only watch silently as the woman went home and got into her new lover's car. At that time, Chang-hee felt that his decision to leave the woman was right because the woman was happy with someone richer and had a car, unlike Chang-hee, who didn't have anything. Then it is shown that Mi-jung contacted one of the man's friends who owed money in Mi-jung's name. The woman told Mi-jung that the guy had run away to Thailand and was trying to get back together with his ex-girlfriend. Mi-jung felt very hurt and confused. Not only did she have to pay the man's debt, but the guy also left Mi-jung to return to his ex-girlfriend in Thailand. After work, while walking to her house, Mi-jung saw her parents running towards Mr. Gu's house. The girl followed them and found Mr. Gu, who was having a nosebleed. Mr. Yum immediately took Mr. Gu to the hospital. Later that night, Meijiang's family discussed what happened to Mr. Gu. There, Meijiang's mother said that Mr. Gu was seriously injured, possibly because of his drinking habits. It's possible that when he was drunk, he fell. Their mother told them about the beginning of Mr. Gu's arrival in the village. At first, no one knew who Mr. Gu was. Even Mr. Gu is not his real name, and no one knows Mr. Gu's background. The man just came to the village and asked for a job. Then Meijiang's father, Mr. Yim, saw that Mr. Gu was diligent, so Mr. Yim finally hired Mr. Gu. Gijiang suddenly said that Mr. Gu never told everyone about his background because he had a case in his past. So he fled to that village to hide from something. However, Mrs. Yim doubts what Gijiang said because her mother believes that Mr. Gu is good, as seen by his behavior, attitude, and work. In the middle of the conversation, Chang He looked out the window and was surprised to see Mr. Gu already there and drunk as usual. Even though, just this afternoon, he looked like someone who had just been beaten. Yes, that's what Mr. Gu always does every night. He never once stopped drinking alcohol and getting drunk. It seems that Mr. Gu wants to forget something by continuing to drink. The next day at the office, Meijiang saw that her boss was very disappointed with Meijiang's work. Of course, this made Meijiang sad. Not only that, the other bosses kept telling Meijiang to join the club. That same day, the boss also told Meijiang that she had found a suitable club for Meijiang who liked to be alone. In front of her boss, Meijiang couldn't hold back her tears because apart from the sadness of her boss who had disappointed her, Meijiang was also sad. After all, being alone was not her life choice. She wants to have friends, express her thoughts, and discuss her complaints. But she couldn't get out of the situation. This makes her cry because no matter how much she tries to change, she will still be a strange introvert who cannot socialize. After work, Meijiang can only lament her life because she is fed up with the life she lives. She felt that no matter how hard she tried to change, no one liked her and could understand her feelings. Arriving at the village because she was fed up with her life, Meijiang wanted to say what she felt when she saw Mr. Gu, who was drunk. Meijiang immediately approached Mr. Gu and said that instead of Mr. Gu doing useless things like that every day, Meijiang asked Mr. Gu to praise Meijiang because Meijiang was tired of her life. Her heart always felt empty and she wanted her heart to be complete. All the men Meijiang met were jerks, so she asked Mr. Gu to praise Meijiang just once. That's what she wanted and never got from another man. Mr. Gu said he couldn't grant Meijiang's request because the girl needed to know what background Mr. Gu had experienced. Even the girl didn't know Mr. Gu's real name. The man says he is just as bad as all the men Meijiang mentioned. That's why he told Meijiang to go home immediately. At home, Mr. Gu was still thinking about Meijiang's words and thinking how to compliment someone. He even looks for sweet words to praise someone on the internet. The next night, Meijiang hung out with her office friends until late. Meijiang's office friend asked why isn't Meijiang home yet even though Meijiang always wants to come home on time. Meijiang answered that she didn't want to go home early today. It turns out that Meijiang was very reluctant to meet Mr. Gu, considering what she said yesterday. She was embarrassed because she was too honest with Mr. Gu. The next day, while at the office, Meijiang tried to contact the friend of the man who owed money in her name. She did it to collect his debt. In the end, Meijiang gets a reply to the message from the man's friend, but the person curses at her. Meijiang accidentally said harshly at that time because she read that person's message. Even though she was in the office, her boss was there, so her boss felt that the harsh words Meijiang said were aimed at him. Because of that, Meijiang had to receive anger from her boss again. That night, when Gijiang came home from work, she met Chang He's ex-girlfriend on the train. She talked to the girl. Here, it is discovered that the girl never left Chang He, but Chang He decided to leave the girl. While at home, Gijiang talks to Chang He. She asks why Chang He is distorting the facts. Why does the young man always look sad about being abandoned by his lover, even though he was the one who left the girl? All this time, Chang He always said that the girl left him. In reality, the girl always tried to contact him and ask him to make up again. Chang He can no longer cover up his lies and express his feelings. Chang He was looking for reasons to leave the girl because he felt insecure. He felt he didn't deserve that girl and thought she had the right to be happy with a more established and prosperous man than Chang He, because he thought he wouldn't be able to make the girl happy, especially now that he had nothing. The next day, while at the office during lunchtime, Meijiang received another call from her boss to discuss the club that Meijiang should choose. Meijiang met her two friends there, who didn't have a club. While waiting, the three of them started thinking about preventing themselves from being summoned by excuses again. Meijiang suddenly got the idea to create a liberation club with only 3 members. Hearing that idea, the 3 of them finally agreed. The next day, Meijiang was seen going to the office. At that time, she ran into Mr. Gu. The two of them have never spoken since the incident where Meijiang said she wanted to be praised by Mr. Gu. Of course, they are like that for shy reasons. At that time, Meijiang dared to turn around to look at Mr. Gu, saying that from now on, the two of them would greet each other. At the weekend, when they were farming in the rice fields, Mijong told Migu that she saw Miss Gu's heart was empty. So Mijong wants to know if Miss Gu wants to be worshipped. Because Mijong is willing to do it, when he hears the girl's words, Mr. Gu falls silent and thinks about it. Mr. Gu kept thinking about what Mijong said. Then the scene shows Mr. Gu being invited to eat at Mijong's house. At that time, Mrs. Yim said that Mijong's father often praised Mr. Gu's performance because it was good. Mijong's father is a person who rarely praises other people. Mr. Gu was one of the people honored by her father. Because from the beginning, Mijong's father only praised Mijong. Mijong was an obedient child from childhood. That's why her father likes Mijong. After that, suddenly, Jijong and Chang He came fighting and entered the house. They took slippers and threw them at Chang He, but they hit Mijong's head. After that, Mijong remained silent for a long time. Then she took the slippers and threw them out of the house. Mijong was always quiet in the past, but now Mijong dares to take action, which makes her two siblings scared. It turns out that Mijong has started to learn to express what she feels. That night, Chang He decided to go to Mr. Gu's house. There, Chang He tells about Mijong. He said that Mijong rarely gets angry because she struggles to express her feelings. But when Mijong is angry, Mijong becomes very scared. Because of this, Mr. Gu has to be careful of Mijong. Then that morning, one of Mijong's office friends called all her office friends and showed them a new club entitled the Liberation Club. There, they all laughed at this extraordinary name. They knew that Mijong joined that club, so they asked Mijong what the club was. Mijong answered that she was also confused because she still needed a plan about what her club would do. Initially, she formed the club because she intended to escape an invisible cage in her life. Because of that, whoever joins this Liberation Club will be on their way to freedom. In the afternoon, Mijong's father made a cupboard. On that day, he was going to give the cupboard to his customer. The customer refused, even though that person had already ordered it. The person said that the price proposed by Mr. Yum was too expensive. At that time, Mr. Yum could only surrender and go home with Mr. Gu. When he got home, Mr. Gu returned to the customer's house. There, Mr. Gu asked the customer to pay because the person had ordered it, which was why he had to pay. It is not shown how Mr. Gu forced the person to pay, but in the end, the person accepted the cupboard and paid for it. Then Mr. Gu gave the money to Mrs. Yum at dinner. Mrs. Yum was curious about how Mr. Gu would collect money from the customer, but her husband just kept quiet and listening, because her husband also didn't know what Mr. Gu had done. The next day, the weather was terrible. The rain fell heavily with lightning, making the office employees fear. But that day, Mijong, Taehoon, and Changmin acted normal. And strangely, Mijong thought that she felt comfortable in that kind of weather. Afterwards, they went to the cafe for their first Liberation Club meeting. There, unlike ordinary people, when they gather, they will circle and chat with each other. The three of them just sat side by side without facing each other because they thought that was how they felt more comfortable. The three of them ended up chatting about everything, especially about freedom, the perceived freedom of each person. Arriving home that night, Mijong was still enjoying and seeing the beauty of the rain. In the middle of that moment, lightning suddenly struck, causing the electricity in their house to go out. Mijong was worried about Mr. Gu's condition, so she immediately ran to Mr. Gu and told him to come into their home. Because it's dangerous to stay outside at that time, Mr. Gu kept quiet and ignored Mijong's words, so Mijong immediately grabbed Mr. Gu's hand and took him into the house. The next day was the weekend. As usual, they farm in the fields. While she was resting, the wind blew so hard that Mijong's hat flew far across the ditch. Seeing this, Chang He told Mijong to take it herself. But unexpectedly, Mr. Gu immediately stood up and offered to get Mijong's hat. Mr. Gu immediately ran very fast and jumped over a very long ditch. Of course, the attraction amazed everyone. They thought ordinary people could not do that because the distance between the trenches was very far. From there, Chang He even thought Mr. Gu was a former national jumping athlete. After taking the hat, Mr. Gu again jumped over the ditch to give the hat to Chang He. After that, Chang He gave the hat to Mijong. From what Mr. Gu has done, you can see that the man has tried to open his heart to Mijong. Chang He was so amazed by what Mr. Gu did that he was curious about Mr. Gu's identity. So Chang He starts sticking to Mr. Gu to ask who Mr. Gu's real identity is. Chang He thought that Mr. Gu might be one of the national jump athletes because several national athletes have the same name. However, Mr. Gu would not say anything about his past or identity. Even when they finished eating, Chang He kept trying to follow Mr. Gu and wanted to urge him to reveal everything. This made Mr. Gu uncomfortable, so he told Chang He to stop. Mijong's father complained that the mosquito coil had run out that night. Mijong, who always obeyed her parents' words, intended to buy mosquito repellent at the supermarket, but her father said it would be better tomorrow if it were late. But because Mijong kept insisting, she finally went to buy mosquito repellent at the supermarket. While on the way, Mijong kept thinking about Mr. Gu's attitude towards her. What Mr. Gu does often makes Mijang because Mr. Gu is usually excellent to Mijang, and it is not uncommon for Mr. Gu to suddenly act indifferent and cold. Of course, this confused Mijang as to what Mr. Gu felt. While at the supermarket, Mijang thought she should thank Mr. Gu for what happened this afternoon. So Mijang bought alcohol for Mr. Gu because she knew every night Mr. Gu always bought alcohol at the supermarket to get drunk. Sure enough, on the way home, Mijang met Mr. Gu, who wanted to buy alcohol. There, Mijang gave the alcohol to Mr. Gu. Mr. Gu used this opportunity to ask about the meaning of Mijang's words, which said they would be different people come spring, not empty, but complete. Mijang explained that if they both adored each other, their feelings would be fuller, not empty like now. Based on her experience, someone will change after they do something they have never done before. Hearing the girl's explanation made Mr. Gu say that he had started to try to care about Mijang like this afternoon. After that, Mijang leaves, thinking that the two of them could become closer. The next day, when Mr. Gu finished buying drinks, he accidentally ran into Mijang, who had just exited the station. At that time, Mijang tried to approach Mr. Gu, but Mr. Gu looked confused and moved away from Mijang to avoid her. In fact, at that time, Mijang attempted to open a conversation with Mr. Gu because Mijang wanted to be closer to Mr. Gu. But in the end, Mijang swallows her disappointment because Mr. Gu has just passed her by. It turned out that Mr. Gu did that because he deliberately avoided her. The man needed clarification about what to do with Mijang. Plus, Mr. Gu has to meet Mijang's family every day. That night, Mr. Gu daydreamed at home because he kept thinking about the consequences of rejecting Mijang's invitation to eat together this afternoon. Because from the bottom of his heart, Mr. Gu wants to get to know Mijang better. However, he is uncomfortable with Mijang's family because the girl's family currently employs Mr. Gu. The next day, Mr. Gu received his salary from Mijang's father. And that day, Mr. Gu dared to ask her father for Mijang's telephone number, because he thinks it is the right thing. When she came home from work, Mijang suddenly stopped walking because she got a message from someone she hadn't expected, namely Mr. Gu. The man sent a message that he had just gotten paid. So he asked if Mijang wanted to eat with him. After reading the message, Mijang was happy. Then the two of them finally ate together. When he came home from eating, Mr. Gu asked why Mijang didn't have someone who made her heart full, even though Mijang had a happy and complete family. Mijang replies that she still doesn't understand some sides of her parents and siblings. While they were talking, Mijang suddenly got off the bus. The girl saw Mijang alone with Mr. Gu. This makes her wonder what Mijang's relationship with Mr. Gu is now since they seem close. Meanwhile, Chang-hee went to Mr. Gu's house after work because he had just bought alcoholic drinks for Mr. Gu. When he arrived, it turned out that Mr. Gu's house was empty. So Chang-hee decided to enter Mr. Gu's house, which was unlocked. While inside, Chang-hee was shocked when he saw lots of used alcoholic drink bottles there. That night, while drunk, Mr. Gu was suddenly approached by Mijang. After that, the two of them chatted for a very long time. Unlike usual, Mijang looked loose there so she could say what she wanted. Mr. Gu remembered that the other day he had bought ice cream for Mijang, but because he didn't dare to give it to her, he ended up storing it in the refrigerator. That night, Mr. Gu immediately took out the ice cream and gave it to Mijang. The next day, Mr. Gu was seen cleaning the house because Mijang had visited his house the other day, and the man felt that his house should be cleaned. After cleaning it all up, Mr. Gu took a photo of the current condition of his home and sent a message to Mijang. That made the girl feel happy to get the message. That day, Mijang also seemed to have changed. She was braver in expressing her feelings to her friends at the office, so it makes them wonder why Mijang's character has changed now. That night, Mijang went to Mr. Gu's house again. There, Mr. Gu said that he found it very difficult to clean his house, especially getting rid of all the used alcohol bottles. But after he decided to worship Mijang and get close to the girl, he became more passionate. At another time, Chang-hee was still curious about Mr. Gu's jump. Finally, that day, he decided to have the courage to try what Mr. Gu was doing. Of course, hearing that, Mr. Gu had doubts about Chang-hee, and sure enough, when he tried to do that, Chang-hee failed and fell into a ditch. Then the scene shows Mr. Gu's cell phone continuing to ring. There were many incoming messages from people looking for Mr. Gu's whereabouts. It turned out that Gejong's suspicion was true, that Mr. Gu avoided the village to hide from the people looking for him. From the cell phone, it can be seen that Mr. Gu's real name is Gu Jae-young. The next day, Mijang's entire family is farming in the field. That day, Mijang and Mr. Gu seemed to be getting closer. Meanwhile, Gejong was taking a break from work and sitting while using an umbrella. Seeing that, their mother immediately scolded Gejong because the girl seemed to be lazing around. But at that time, Gejong said that it wasn't her who was lazing around. It was her sister, Mijang, because her younger sister was not working but dating with Mr. Gu. The next day, Mijang sent a message to Mr. Gu and told him that she would come home late today because there was a club gathering at the office. Mijang also talked about the club she joined, which only contained 3 people with the same goal, to experience freedom. The scene switches to the cafe where Meijeong gathers with her club friends. There, each of them told what they wanted to gain regarding freedom. The story begins with Changmin expressing his heart from his notebook. Then suddenly, Yejong contacted Meijeong and said she was waiting for her sister in front of the cafe to go home together. Without realizing it, Taehoon suddenly came over to her. Because they knew each other, Taehoon invited Gijong to join their group. The event continued, and now Taehoon was the one who expressed his heart. When Taehoon told him what he wanted, everyone fell silent while listening to the story. Taehoon said that when he was little, his father died, and not long after that, his mother also died. Because both of his parents died close to each other, Taehoon was devastated. And that is the reason why Taehoon will never leave his daughter, even though he is divorced. Because Taehoon knows how painful it is to lose both parents when you are young. Taehoon always tries to be an excellent father to his child. That's why Taehoon wrote in a notebook that he wanted to be free from that feeling. On the way home, Gijong was touched by Taehoon's life story, so she asked Meijeong for Taehoon's number. After Gijong got Taehoon's number, she immediately contacted Taehoon. At this moment, Gijong immediately asked about Taehoon's problems with women in his past, but Taehoon answered that all of his problems in the past had been resolved so that Gijong could calm down. At other times, Meijeong kept trying to contact the man who owed money in her name, but instead of paying the debt, the man scolded Meijeong. At that time, Meijeong could only cry, lamenting her fate. She just realized that the man had fooled her. At home, Gijong was curious about her younger sister's relationship with Mr. Gu, so she asked who asked her out first. Meijeong answered that Meijeong asked to start the relationship first, but they were not dating. Instead, they began to dare to praise each other. Elsewhere, Mr. Gu dared to answer the phone, which was constantly ringing. There, someone immediately told the Gu and scolded Mr. Gu. Here, it appears that Mr. Gu is a gangster who used to manage a bar. The person on the phone was a colleague discussing Mr. Gu's business. During this time, Mr. Gu decided to stay away from all that business and disappeared into the village pretending to be a poor man. That day, Meijeong tried to pay off her friend's debt by using the money she would use as a deposit for a house. She deliberately used it to pay off her debt because Meijeong didn't want her family to know about this matter. After leaving the bank, Meijeong met Mr. Gu. Meijeong said that she had paid off her debt. Mr. Gu immediately asked whether the man had paid his debt, but Meijeong answered that he had not, but he will promise to pay. Mr. Gu immediately asked for the name and telephone number of the man who owed Meijeong because Mr. Gu wanted to finish him off immediately. But Meijeong didn't give it because Meijeong felt she could still solve this problem without Mr. Gu's help. When she arrived at Mr. Gu's house, Meijeong gathered the courage to express her anger. Meijeong said that throughout her life, everyone has looked down on her and considered her incapable of solving her problems. And because of that, she will hide this debt problem from her family. Because Meijeong doesn't want her family to know that Meijeong is getting into trouble because of her stupidity, Meijeong also refuses help from Mr. Gu because she feels she can still solve this problem herself. Unlike usual, she just kept quiet. To strengthen the girl, Mr. Gu told her that he used to be a person who was not afraid of anything. But now, as he faced Meijeong, all of his courage was gone. Mr. Gu also said that Meijeong was the only person he was afraid of and the person he most wanted to meet. Because of the man's words, Meijeong became calmer. That night, when Mr. Gu had dinner with Meijeong's family as an older sister, Gijong asked about the relationship between Mr. Gu and Meijeong. Mr. Gu replied that they were just appreciating and praising each other. Gijong felt annoyed because she didn't understand Mr. Gu's answer. Then Chang Ki explained that their relationship was more than friends. Then, when Mr. Gu went to deliver goods, one of his past friends, Samsik, saw Mr. Gu riding a truck. Samsik immediately reported this to his boss. But the man said there was no way a rich man like Mr. Gu would want to ride in a rundown truck like that. According to him, what Samsik saw was not Mr. Gu. Elsewhere, Meijeong is giving the results of her work to her boss. But again, her boss said that Meijeong's work was disappointing. But when the executives saw the work, they were happy with what Meijeong had done. While working, Mr. Gu got a message from his friend Samsik. Mr. Gu immediately called Samsik. Samsik said he had seen Mr. Gu filling up petrol using a truck. Samsik also discussed Mr. Gu's dirty business past. At this moment, Samsik said that Mr. Gu had to return immediately and not disappear. Mr. Gu must immediately finish off Director Back. If Mr. Gu don't do that, then Mr. Gu will be finished. At that time, Mr. Gu could only answer that he still couldn't come back because he was busy, but not long after this, he would come back and solve the problems of the past. As usual, Mr. Gu picked up Meijeong, who had just come home from work in the night. The two of them walked together back home. Even though they were just walking together, that simple thing made them both happy because Meijeong never told anyone unless she was asked. But it seemed that night she said Mr. Gu everything she had thought. It appears that Meijeong is very comfortable around Mr. Gu. The next day, Meijeong was asked to meet with her superior. However, different from the previous days that day, Meijiang let out everything she wanted to say and think. Meijiang felt that she had changed, and at that moment, Meijiang began to believe she was a valuable person worthy of being loved. Elsewhere, Meijiang's father and Mr. Gu were carrying things, but while on the way, suddenly, the items in the truck fell. Mr. Gu immediately tried to return the item, but when he went downstairs, Samsik and Mr. Baek were passing by and saw Mr. Gu. So they immediately stopped and asked Mr. Gu to go home, because the two of them had been looking for Mr. Gu for a long time. But Mr. Gu invited them to talk elsewhere. Ms. Baek immediately said he knew that Mr. Gu was pretending to be poor and hiding in the village. From here, it is told that it turns out that Mr. Gu used to date Mr. Baek's younger sister, but the girl had died, and of course, that was one of the things that made Mr. Gu sad. After the meeting, Mr. Gu went home. While at home, Mr. Yim worries about Mr. Gu because he has met someone suspicious and looks dangerous. When he saw that Mr. Gu had returned home, Mr. Yim felt more relieved. When he got home, Meijiang immediately prepared snacks for Mr. Gu. After that, Meijiang told Mr. Gu to rest because he looked tired. When Meijiang was home, her mother asked why Meijiang always visited Mr. Gu's house. At this moment, innocently, Meijiang answered that she was now dating Mr. Gu. Of course, Meijiang's answer surprised her mother and Gijan. The next day, as usual, Mr. Gu worked with Mr. Yim. Meijiang's father thought that Mr. Gu might be in debt. That's why yesterday he was visited by people who looked terrible. That's why he talked about his bad experiences in the past. It turns out that Mr. Yim once owed someone a debt, but he can pay off all the debts, so he advised Mr. Gu to work hard to pay off the debt. Mr. Yim doesn't know that Mr. Gu is a wealthy man, so he is not someone who can afford to pay, but he decided to hide from his past. That night, Meijiang went to Mr. Gu's house. For the first time, Meijiang saw that Mr. Gu was not drunk. Meijiang asks what the reason is. Mr. Gu immediately told her one of the last things he had always kept hidden. He used to have someone very close to him, and that person intended to commit suicide because her life was complicated. Mr. Gu told the person to go to a psychiatrist because at least he would try to help lighten the person's burden. However, after leaving the psychiatrist's office, the person did not stop her intentions but immediately committed suicide. Meijiang asked who that person was. Mr. Gu answered that she was his ex-girlfriend, and that was one of the reasons why Mr. Gu always got drunk every night. Because he was haunted by guilt, he always thought that the reason his girlfriend committed suicide was because of Mr. Gu's fault. Then the story flashbacks to the past. At that time, Mr. Gu was trapped by his friend Samsik, so thugs beat him at the station. But luckily, there was a woman who tried to save him by telling him. And it turns out that the woman is Meijiang. Unknown to Meijiang, Mr. Gu decided to worship Meijiang because Meijiang was the one who saved Mr. Gu. Otherwise, Mr. Gu would be killed by the thugs. That night, when Mr. Gu bought alcohol, when passing a public telephone, he was reminded of memories. At that time, he had just lost the person he loved. His subordinates told him Director Baek had taken all the business from Mr. Gu. Because of this, Mr. Gu must return immediately. But at that moment, Mr. Gu had just lost his girlfriend, and he felt sad and tired. So he told his subordinates that he was tired of everything. Then Mr. Gu got drunk in the rice fields. Suddenly, a wild dog was about to bite him. Luckily, Meijiang came and tried to get rid of the dogs. And for the umpteenth time, Meijiang saved himself. At this moment, Mr. Gu said that Meijiang should not have saved him from his lousy fate because Mr. Gu felt that he deserved all that bad luck. Because Mr. Gu still feels guilty about the death of his lover and also his sins in the past. Because of this, Mr. Gu continued to think he deserved bad luck. A few days later, Mr. Gu decides to face his past. He goes to the club where he used to work to meet Director Baek. When Mr. Gu arrived at the club, everyone present bowed and saluted Mr. Gu. But Mr. Gu went straight into Director Baek's room. Of course, Director Baek was shocked and asked what Mr. Gu's arrival meant. The man expected Mr. Gu to come later. Mr. Gu said that he hasn't been able to sleep well lately since meeting Director Baek. Because Director Baek had misjudged him, Mr. Gu was acting and running away from all of his problems by pretending to live a poor life in the village when in fact Mr. Gu just wanted to take a break from his routine. Mr. Gu felt very disappointed with Director Baek because he had betrayed him in his business. Mr. Gu said that what he was doing now was only temporary because he would return. When he returns, he will make two choices: quit his business and continue farming and become a farmer, or return to this business and run it. Of course, when Mr. Gu decides to return, he will kick Director Baek out of his current position. Therefore, Mr. Gu asked Director Baek not to be strange. Before going home, Samsik met Mr. Gu to explain the tragedy at the station, that he had never sent a message to Mr. Gu because, at that time, his cell phone had been taken by Director Baek. So the one who sent the trap message was Director Baek. Samsik wanted Mr. Gu to understand him. Mr. Gu replied that he already knew everything without Samsik needing to explain. That night, Chang He found a costly car key in the toilet. Chang He is obsessed with owning a car, so he asks Mr. Gu if he owns this car. Without further ado, Mr. Gu immediately took Chang He to his apartment in Seoul, and Mr. Gu showed him his car. Of course, Chang He was amazed to see the luxury car in front of him. He never thought a man like Mr. Gu would have such a luxurious car. After that, Mr. Gu gave the car keys to Chang He, and Chang